Number two, oh, those come roaring back in New Germany. So we've long talked about Germany as an economic giant, although it has weakened in the last few years, and a political pygmy. And the Germans have a proportional representation system, which naturally yields to coalition politics. They do not have the feisty cut and thrust of the British Parliament. Not that the British Parliament is doing that well these days. So Germany just had an election, and the best figures for that are actually unsurprisingly available on Deutsche Welle. And so we'll just show you some of the lovely graphs. And
Deutsche
these
Welle,
are
by the
Deutsche
way,
Welle.
is superb.
Pardon me?
They say Deutsche Welle is, by the way, I think is a superb press organization.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They are very professional. We respect them a lot. And you look, this is Deutsche Welle. You see SPD won 16.4% of the vote. That is the Social Democrats. The Chancellor Olaf Scholz belongs to the SPD. You can see they've had a hammering. The CDU and CSU, which is the Christian Democrats and the Christian Socialists, they got only 28.6% of the vote for all their victory. It's not an emphatic victory. They cannot form a government on their own. The Greens have 11.6% of the vote. All right, they didn't do too badly. The FDP, which is the Liberal, basically Free Democratic Party, that's the full form. They got 4.3% of the vote. And unless you cross the 5% barrier in Germany's system, you don't really win seats. So tough luck. The AfD, the Alliance für Deutschland, and Alex Gloy, our editor at large, who is German, who is a brilliant economist, has been following the election. We'll publish a piece by him very soon explaining the results. The AfD, as expected, did very well, and it got 20.8% of the vote. It isn't that far off from the CDU. It has beaten the SPD comprehensively. So it is clear now that the top two parties after this election are the center-right and the far-right. In fact, the center-right has gone more and more towards the far-right, but we'll get to that in a second. So the AfD has done well. The left party, which is former communists, they've done very well. And the BSW, which is led by a half Iranian, half German lady, charismatic, that just about failed to get to 5%. Had they got to 5%, it would have been an even more fractious parliament. So what this shows you is that German society is deeply divided, and German politics is very fractious. Okay, I repeat, German society is divided, and German politics is fractious. Okay.
And if I could add in one point on this, not only is the society divided and broken into pieces as you have described, but there's a strong geographical historical component too. AfD's support is almost exclusively in what was East Germany. They're in single digits in what was West Germany.
No, that's not true, Glenn, though that's no longer true. So I have the figures right in front of me. The AfD got 29.7% of the vote in former East Germany. So obviously they swept East Germany, but they got 13% of the vote in former West Germany. So they are growing in West Germany as well. They're still quite a way off, but they are no longer in single digits, Glenn.
Yeah,
but you're right.
Change. Okay.
You're right. Their strength comes from East Germany. And we'll get to the reasons for that in a second. But you look at the vote swing. Look at who is the biggest loser. The Red, the Traffic Light Coalition, which was the Red, the Greens, and the Liberals. All three of them were running a coalition government. It got very little done. It was fractious at various times. It seemed that the cabinet ministers were at each other's throats instead of governing. And to be fair to them, they had massive challenges. They had to deal with the war. They had to deal with inflation. They had to deal with protection through the back door, Inflation Reduction Acts. They had to deal with sinking German economy. But whatever the reasons, you can see that they suffered enormously. And the parties who suffered the most are SPD and FDP. And FDP in some ways suffered most because they are now a spent force. Unless they make a massive comeback and massive changes, they are a spent force. Now, the CDU, CSU did gain 4.4% of their vote. You can see AFD gained over 10%, 10.4% of the vote. The left, 3.9%, not bad. But really, it is the far left, BSW, led by Sahra Magennet, who's, in the words of a German diplomat, completely nutty. Maybe he or she is wrong, but the one saving grace that person took from this election is that she didn't cross the 5%. And this is the distribution of seats. As you can see, it makes for a very fractured verdict. And the big challenge will be, how does the left engage with the right? How does the SPD engage with the CDU, CSU? How do the Greens engage with either? This is such a fractious parliament that it's unlikely that they'll be able to get chits through. They'll be able to agree upon massive cuts to expenditure or hikes in taxes and so on and so forth. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we are going to talk about why the AFD did so well. Well, one of the things that all Germans, and opinion polls seem to be showing this, are concerned about is immigration. There has been a real concern about immigration. Of course, there have been attacks. We've been reading about them. And the percentage of people born outside Germany is higher than the percentage of people born outside the US. So as a percentage of population, Germany now has more migrants than the US. Now, arguably, and as Alex Gloy will tell us, that given declining birth rates, Germany does need migration. Germany cannot continue to grow or even remain highly productive without some immigrants. But when you have mass immigration, that also creates insecurity, that creates cultural insecurity. And tightening of migration and asylum law is something the new leader of the CDU, mind you, who lost 2 elections prior to lead the CDU. He was a rival. We are talking about Friedrich Merz, who was a lawyer, who has been a partner at, I believe, at an American law firm, if I'm not, Mayer Brown, if I remember correctly. And he was not a partner, senior counsel. And he has served on the boards of many companies, including BlackRock Germany. So this is someone who's a transatlanticist. This is someone who was a rival of Angela Merkel. This is someone who, when Angela went out of politics, when Angela rose to her heights, dizzy heights, this is someone who, after Angela left, ran, lost, then ran again, lost, and then finally became the head of the CDU. And he promised, like Nicolas Sarkozy, rupture with the past. He said, let with Angela Merkel. And he talked about tightening migration and asylum law. His model is the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who has a zero asylum policy, who has introduced benefit cuts and increased deportations, who believes, like many leaders now do in Europe, of taking back control their borders because they believe that the EU policy is broken. And therefore, he passed a bill which was ultimately shot down, but he passed the bill with support of the AFD. So the firewall, in some, as we say, against the far right, is already, some would say, some German experts would say, is broken. And so, what is his strategy? His strategy is to remake the CDU and beat the AFD at its own game. Now, many German political analysts think it's a dangerous game to play. The firewall against the AFD is unlikely to hold. And ultimately, what is important to note is that uh, the AFD is now a real force in German politics, and there was a sentiment, as someone said, quote unquote, too much money is being spent on foreigners and on Ukraine. And with the cost of living crisis, with inflation, with economic pain, not just in East Germany, but in West Germany. And mind you, I'll share my screen again. I'd like you to take a look um, at, uh, at, uh, at
Germany has had zero GDP growth for 5 years.
uh, I think two for sure, but this is my piece. Is the German economy now destined to decline? And note the date, September 2023. So 2 years old, or 1.5 years old. And we talked about an economy in deep crisis, residential construction, lack of housing, production index, business climate. We talked about inflation, Russia-Ukraine war. We talked about how demand declined, or demand crashes because the Chinese economy crashed. And as the joke, or as the adage went, when China sneezed, Germany caught a cold because Germany had become very reliant on exports to China. And then, of course, US protectionism. And then on top of that, of course, was self-inflicted wounds, bureaucracy, which Glenn has talked about, lack of skilled workers as well, and so on and so forth. So you can see that um, all was not well in Germany for a while, and government's inability to tackle the economic crisis head on, to address concerns about immigration, uh, Muslim radicalism, and terrorist attacks, all of these have led to the winning of CDU, which in policy terms is increasingly close to AFD. And although the firewall is supposedly still standing, yet it seems really unlikely how Germany can have a government without either the SPD and the other parties coming together for a minimum common agenda. And with that, as the previous coalition government showed, is likely to be difficult. Or CDU accommodates AfD. So all is not well in Germany. And if Germany doesn't do well, and Germany is the heart of Europe, then naturally Europe will not have leadership. And the fracturing in German politics is mirrored by the fracturing in French politics, which France does not have a budget either. And so, as far as we are concerned, at least I'm concerned, I see a tough 5 to 10 years in Europe. It's only after a long period of much churning and painful reform that Europe will come back in some way.
So Merz has spoken of as priorities for him, or objectives anyway, or deregulation of the German economy, strengthening of the German defense, leading Europe to greater cohesion so that it can stand on its own, continued support and even increased support necessary for Ukraine because of what the U.S. is no longer going to be doing. Those are all nice things to say. What is likely to concretely happen, if one can predict that? What will he achieve or try to get out of the paralysis and achieve something?
I think if Europe is paralyzed, then I think strongmen like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are going to extract geopolitical rent from Europe. And Europe is going to suffer enormously because of its lack of cohesion, because of its lack of vitality, because of its lack of investment in defense for decades. Europe does not have much leverage. So both the US and Russia are going to prefer Europe to concessions.
So actually, we're returning to a situation not pre 1945 or pre 1914, but pre 1681, perhaps, or maybe 1579, when Europe collectively had potentially greater strength in numbers than the Ottomans in this case, but were unable ever to be cohesive enough, and so were slowly piecemeal, generally overmatched for hundreds of years.
Well, yes, I think we are back to the future. Certainly, if I was European, I would be worried. As I said early
Yeah.
on, the costs have gone up, and the income will go down. Europe
Okay.
is an
Well,
aging continent as well.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.